So, welcome to the Anthesis podcast. My name is Dean Sanders. I'm the founder and the chairman of Good Brand, a company which became part of the Anthesis Group in 2019. And I'm going to be hosting today's podcast, which is on the subject of designing sustainable packaging solutions. And I'm going to be joined by Debbie Hitchen, who's the Director of Sustainable Products, Circularity and Chemistry at Anthesis, and also an external guest, Mike Webster, who's the Director of 3D Structure and Experience at a global brand design agency called 1HQ. And what we really want to do is get into the subject of how we can help our client partners develop better design solutions in packaging, which integrate the science of sustainability and the measurement of impact, but also retain creativity and imagination. And so we've got the experts with us. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to each of them. And I might just ask them, if I could, just to introduce themselves a little bit so you can get a sense of their careers and their journey and their experience. So, Debbie, if I may start with you, could you just introduce a little bit the work that you've been doing and what led you to be part of Anthesis and the work you do today?
Yes, thank you, Dean. So I joined Anthesis about 5 years ago from a company called LRS Consultancy, which was a fairly small, fairly niche London-based organisation that really just looked at circular economy, waste and recycling. And really my background spans over 20 years of experience now across the whole supply chain for sustainable materials. But particularly since about the late 1990s, I've been working more and more in packaging and sustainable packaging material choices. And in the last couple of years, thanks to David Attenborough and the Blue Planet Effect, I found a large amount of additional work has come our way from companies and clients who are trying to address their sustainable packaging initiatives and are looking for advice and support to understand what sustainability means for them in the context of their supply chain, their business, and their customer base. I think it's fascinating. I absolutely love working in this space. And I'm particularly excited to have had the opportunity to meet Mike and to start working with 1HQ, because I feel that they, with their expertise, bring an opportunity to activate the change for clients. So, where we can do lots of technical and scientific research around life cycle analysis for materials and circularity metrics, it's really exciting to have the opportunity to work with an organization that can take some of those ideas into new packaging designs, new packaging systems, and start that process of creating something on shelf that meets the sustainability criteria for current modern day demands.
Great. Thanks, Debbie. So, Mike, over to you. Maybe you could just share a bit more about your background and the work that you do at 1HQ.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Dean. Well, I'm an industrial designer, so I've been working within the industrial design space for the last 20 years. And initially, it was mainly much more consumer product or industrial design features. I've designed hospital beds and baby cups and mobile phones, things like that. But probably over the last 10, 12, 13 years, I've had much more of a focus around packaging design in particular. And that's what we do at 1HQ. The core of what we design is packaging. And of course, today, that packaging absolutely has to be sustainable. We just can't carry on developing and designing products that are going to affect the earth in a negative way. So that's a real core focus, and that's what the team is very passionate about. And that's really why the coupling up with Anthesis and of course working with Debbie is so fantastic for us, is because we're creatives. We're always thinking about how we can make things better. That's what we really want to do. We want to create things that are going to offer better experiences, that are going to do better things. But we also need to understand what the impact of what we create is. What we don't want to do is create something that could actually be worse for the environment. And so working with Debbie and Anthesis, we're able to really understand how the impact can be measured. And that really helps steer us and gives us the confidence that when we do develop and refine towards production, we're doing the right thing.
It sounds really interesting and really important. As listening to both of you, obviously, you can really sense that there is a 1 and 1 equals at least 3 here in terms of an integrated solution that addresses lots of the challenges that our clients might be facing. So it really is a sort of joint venture partnership. How did it come about? So, I mean, first of all, maybe Debbie, I'm just interested, for you to sort of build a bit further on your earlier comments. What was the challenge that maybe you were hearing from clients, or the sort of unmet need that you felt needed a sort of a new response and needed a joint venture of this kind?
Well, over recent years, I think there's been a lot more interest in sustainable packaging. It's coming initially from consumers, but there is an equal push from charitable organisations, not for profit organisations, and indeed there's a regulatory or policy framework in many countries now, and certainly that's growing on a global basis. So there are lots of drivers that are pushing organisations to think much more carefully about the substrates that they use, or the types of packaging materials, or the types of products that they're putting onto the marketplace. I think the challenge that we heard most frequently was around what really is sustainability. When it comes to packaging, there are so many different complex parts of this jigsaw puzzle that many of our clients were struggling to understand how to prioritize it, particularly I think when there was such a sudden interest in plastics about 3 or 4 years ago, where plastics previously had been considered to be really good for certain preservation properties, and protecting the product in its supply chain and beyond into the consumer's home. And suddenly there was a big question mark over actually whether that was the right thing. And we found customers at the time became somewhat confused about what they should be doing if they were going to eliminate these problematic plastics, or eliminate plastic altogether from their portfolio. Because that doesn't just mean that you need to find a substitution, an alternative. In many cases, that means that actually you've got to kind of go back to the drawing board and look at the end-to-end system that you are using for your product or your packaging, and see whether there is an alternative way of doing things. And this plays out really nicely in examples like reusables, or refillables. And this is where I think coming together with an organization like 1HQ, working with people like Mike, helps our clients to be able to visualize what a refill or reusable system could actually look like for them in reality, and how that might not just address sustainability issues, maybe by reducing plastic in their portfolio, or reducing the weight of the packaging they use, or indeed meeting a target around increase of reusability or refill. But also it has other benefits. So it can help with things like customer loyalty and customer retention when you're using refill programs. So I think it helps them to see those opportunities, but also to take them in the context of their own business or their own consumer group. And this is where finding a partnership with somebody who can help them to visualize that end-to-end system and to see what that would look like for them in the context of their business operations is so useful.
Yeah, and I get that, and I think particularly that last point around the fact that refillability, if I can use that word, can drive loyalty, sort of kind of really anchors this also in the consumer experience. And maybe Mike, just in terms of get your perspective on what you're hearing from your client partners and some of the big brand owners about that customer experience, and does it echo what Debbie's been saying in terms of the effects of the Attenborough investigation of plastic? Is it consumer concern? What's driving that from the point of view of your clients?
Well, I mean, as Debbie said, I think the problem is that there's a lot of confusion. Consumers are confused, um, but clients are confused as well. There isn't one solution that fits all, and actually, different clients have different requirements and therefore different ambitions for what they can achieve. I mean, if you compare a food brand with a personal care brand, I mean, what sustainability means will differ. So I think it's really important that we're able to help clients really understand from the offset, what does sustainability mean to them? What would sustainability be? So again, that's what Debbie and Anthesis can really help us with, because that's something that when we share ideas with clients, it's sometimes difficult to judge. Well, is this a better solution than this one? In terms of consumer experience, I mean, again, as a designer, I always want to create something that's better. So something that I've found with packaging over the years, and it's been fantastic to see the shift. When I first started working in packaging, it was very much packaging was there to protect and distribute the product inside. So some of my very early work was starting to bring, you know, brand experience into that. Making something a bit more memorable and enjoyable. And so now, when we think about sustainability, as Debbie said, because we sometimes have to start from the beginning again. Well, this provides a fantastic opportunity to actually reframe what that consumer experience is. So if we talk about reusability, I mean, it can't just be a pack that can be reused. It has to offer more to incentivize the consumer to want to actually reuse it. Um, there has to be something better in it. So I sort of starting to see it, sustainability as this foundation for innovation where we could shift packaging away from being something that's fairly functional and something that people don't necessarily engage with that much to being something that can be as engaging and emotionally driving as a consumer product would be. And that for me is what I would like to try and do over the coming years is really elevate that packaging experience to something where people value the packaging and don't just see it as something that's disposable and can just be chucked away without any thought.
Yes, and I suppose that's the thing. I mean, I think that the sort of recent media focus on plastics in particular, has sort of presented the public with a great big problem, and probably a sort of sense of guilt, and that's never a great thing in terms of a kind of consumer relationship. And how do we flip that into being a positive behavioral change? Because I think a lot of what we talk about in sustainability is the need for behavioral changes at national, international, or family or individual level. And what role do you both think that redesigning and reimagining packaging solutions, what role can that play in actually helping consumers to change their behavior towards a more sustainable impact? Maybe I could just maybe Mike, you could just sort of build a little bit on your earlier point around innovation. How do you see packaging driving sustainable behavior change?
Well, I think that's the key. That's where the experience comes in. I mean, I think there's been a lot of sustainable packaging design over the recent years, which has revolved around materials, and there's been lots of fantastic innovation around new material substrates. But I think the problem is that if the behaviour remains the same, which is to just chuck things away and not really care about where that piece of packaging ends up, then rather than having plastic bottles running, in the sea, we'll have bottles made from other materials in the sea. I mean, recently, in fact, I saw a photo with lots of face masks floating in the sea. So that's the key thing here is that as much as material is incredibly important, and obviously it plays an important role in terms of carbon footprint when we think about sustainability. It's not just plastic waste; it's the carbon footprint and the other key measures around it. We do need to drive that change in behaviour, and as I said, that for me is about people valuing packaging much more, or making packaging something that's much easier to dispose of if we have to, but to do something with the disposal of it where they don't have to think twice. It's very clear and obvious what they need to do with it, because again, it's that confusion.
Yeah, I'd like to come back and ask you both in a moment what you look at out there currently in the industry as perhaps some examples of best practice and where we should all be heading. But before I do, just from your perspective, Debbie, on this issue of behaviour change, maybe examples that you've seen in your work, or how important do you think packaging is in facilitating real behaviour change?
Well, I mean, I'm a bit of an optimist, and I was encouraged earlier this year when I read a survey that had been undertaken by a packaging company that suggested that nearly 60% of consumers that they'd surveyed would be less likely to buy packaging that was in a polluting wrapper, and that over half of them said they actively looked at the information that was provided on pack to decide what they should do with it at end of life when they were making the purchase. So I think that's quite a significant indicator of change, because I think when I started my career 20 years ago, apart from the fact that there was no information on pack, I don't think consumers really paid that much attention. As Mike has said. I think it really was a linear, use and dispose kind of model. So I'm encouraged by those signs, but I do think that it has to go hand in hand with other aspects that will make that easy for the consumer to be able to know what to do with it at end of life and to behave in that way. So there's a great behavior change model which is sometimes called the 6 E's, which I know DEFRA has used a lot in the past, and that model really talks about other things that need to go alongside the information, and that is, enablers effectively to help the consumer have access to the right recycling facilities, to see it happening in practice, so to have it sort of emanated by peers and others in their neighbourhood and so on. So for me, behaviour change is actually quite a complex structure of different things, and I believe that packaging can play a key part of it, and I think that there's an increasing awareness amongst producers of packaging about trying to create a sort of harmonious approach to communicating through labeling and messaging that consumers will understand. And I do think that that will go a long way. But this is also tied up for me with an understanding of what consumers can put in their household collections, and maybe trying to make those collections more similar to what are available in on-the-go scenarios or office scenarios or schools. Because once we get that commonality, we take another step closer to helping customers to understand what to do.
Yes, no, I fully get that. I mean, and I suppose just coming back to the point I made earlier, I'm intrigued because there's a lot of talk here about things that we could be doing and should be doing, and without getting into the sort of naming and blaming or naming and shaming sort of dynamic. Could you call out either at a category level or maybe some individual brands that you've been looking at, where you see some interesting developments and things that sort of point us towards the future of sustainable packaging that we all want? Mike, anything that you have been working on that you think is worth sort of signalling as an interesting development?
Well, if I may use an example of something we've done at 1HQ, we work a lot with Unilever, and within Unilever there's a grand ambition actually to truly take on the sustainability challenge, and we do a lot of work with SIF. And recently we designed a bottle that was for the e-commerce channel, so specifically for Amazon. But we created a new bottle that goes with their refill pods. So SIF have developed some refill pods that contain concentrates, and the idea is that rather than just buying a cleaning product like a spray, and you would use it once and chuck everything in the bin, and there's a lot of plastic in there, you buy a refill pod that you can screw in. You take off the trigger, you screw into the bottle, and it dispenses a concentrate, and you just add the water, and you just put the trigger back on, and you can reuse the trigger. But of course, it's still quite strange for consumers to get their heads around the fact that they're using the same bottle. That sort of feels slightly disposable. So what we did for the e-commerce channel is we created a bottle for life, and here we looked at making it feel more precious, to give much more pride in what it does and in the experience that it offers, and the fact that it could even be left out because it would look rather beautiful. And of course that is the case for many people. They don't have space to store things, so it's a consideration. So this was an example where we're trying to shift the behavior. We're trying to get people to reuse a product that is typically disposed of after a single use. And it's a step in the right direction. I think that's another thing to consider here, is that when we talk about behavior change, we can't change behaviors overnight. We have to do it through a series of coordinated, thought through steps that helps that behavior shift over those steps. So that's a good example, I think, of something that we've done recently. But there's lots of good examples out there, I think, around reusable systems. I think there's also some nice examples from a on the go mentality where reusability works within a home or an office environment where you have a fixed abode. But when you're out on the go, it's obviously more difficult to reuse. But I like what Evian are doing. They've just released a bottle that doesn't have a label on it. So again, it's taking those small steps to at least reduce the impact, even if we can't change everything in the first instance.
Yeah, no, those are good examples. I like really the practicality and the sort of usability in the consumer household, which in particular in that specific example. Debbie, anything that you've seen that you think is heralds a sort of new approach by companies or categories to some of these issues?
I think there's a lot of really exciting work going on in this at the moment, actually. The thing that's possibly leading some of that is the number of organisations over the last couple of years who've created or signed up to commitments and targets. A good example of this is the 400 odd participants in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation New Plastics Economy commitments. And within those commitments, those organizations are making specific commitments to eliminate certain types of materials or packaging that can't be recycled or are hard or problematic to deal with at end of life, to include recycled content, which is a great example of something which will create a circular economy, which we all agree is a great way to solve the plastic leakage or product leakage problems that we're experiencing at the moment by effectively giving a demand to that material as a secondary raw material. So I think there's lots of stuff going on around that, but I think those things that we see perhaps most visibly are the initiatives around recycling. And there are some great examples of companies, mostly the ones that I would think of that come to mind are FMCG, food and beverage, for example. And I think there are lots of things that businesses are doing that aren't necessarily being publicly talked about. So I would encourage organisations who are doing interesting and innovative change to their packaging to be open about it and to talk about it and to share that experience, because all the evidence is that actually consumers are looking for us as the industry to take the lead in this area. And it saddens me that I often come across organisations where there are some great examples of innovation that haven't been upheld as case studies for sustainability, when I think that there's lots of appetite from people to see that sort of move towards more sustainable packaging.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, there are so many different rankings and ratings on so many impact areas in sustainability, but some sort of award system, maybe, or opportunity for sustainable innovation in packaging could be a really great way of recognizing some of that work and encouraging best practice. And so, maybe just to sort of bring this a little bit to a conclusion, a wrap up. There's a couple of things that interest me. I suppose the first thing is, given how much is happening in this space, what is it that makes Infinite unique? What is this new partnership between One HQ and Anthesis coming together? What are we able to bring to this that is different to others? And what excites you about the uniqueness of this offer? Maybe Debbie, you could build on some of your earlier points, but just to kind of really bring this home to us in terms of what we're able to do now.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really exciting about this is the opportunity to bring the science and the robust decision making tools that Anthesis has been working on for so long together with something that actually allows a business or organization to see that in real terms as a new line of packaging for their own specific marketplace, their own SKUs and products. And I think that for me is what sort of takes sustainability to the next level. So we've been working as Anthesis for a long time on helping clients to understand the impact of a choice of material or a particular packaging system on GHG emissions or carbon or climate change or circularity, whether it's recyclable at end of life and so on. But to then be able to move that to a conversation where you can create a whole new customer experience or a whole new opportunity for on shelf or brand, which is based on the vision of a sustainable, scientifically evidenced approach, I think is what is so exciting. And when Mike and I first started talking about this infinite venture, we looked into the marketplace to see how many other organizations had the experience and the gravitas that Anthesis has around that sort of science and evidence based approach, combined with the creativity and the skills and experience to be able to move it to the next stage and activate new packaging. And actually, we found that globally we would be in a very small pool if we were able to come together and effect this partnership. So, what I think is really interesting about this is that I don't see much other opportunity for organizations to get this end to end joined up approach from two organizations with the depth of experience that we've both got.
Great. Mike, any additional thoughts from you on the sort of uniqueness of this, particularly in your universe, where I guess you're pitching against other design agencies and consultancies all the time for for consumer cut through and all the other things that brand owners need in addition to the sustainability topic. How's that resonating with people that you're talking to, or how do you see the uniqueness of this offer?
I mean, I think there's two things for me. I mean, I think the first thing, which is just perhaps in response to how we can work together, is, design, it's a creative output, but it needs to be framed, it needs to be contextualized. And sometimes, clients, sort of think that as designers, we need to have, lots of space to think and be creative. But actually, to be really effective, we need to have guide rails that's going to really inform and help focus our creativity. So we're actually putting it in the places where it matters. So again, that's that lovely thing about working with Anthesis, is that you can provide us those guide rails within which to work and to be creative. I think another thing though that I'd like to say is it's also what we can provide the client. The way we work is entwined and we're bouncing off each other. So what the client will get working with us is a process that is completely fused together, that is building off each other, that is inspiring each other, so that when Anthesis will come back with something, we're able to build upon that in real time. So it means that we can ultimately get more robust solutions that have been properly thought through from the different perspectives, but we can also work quicker because we're no longer working in a linear process where somebody does one thing and then somebody else does another and it has to follow each other. We can actually be working together and we get there quicker. So I think that's the final thing I wanted to mention there.
Yeah, that makes great sense, because I was actually going to come on to talk a bit about the process, but maybe then just as a final concluding comment, really, from each of you is Infinite is out there. You're starting to speak with clients or prospective partners on this work, without mentioning any names, of course. What sort of resonance is this already starting to get, Mike? Maybe you could talk first, that, and then Debbie, your thoughts.
Well, I think the resonance is grounded in what we've already said. They're excited by the fact that the rigor that Anthesis offers is going to be brought to life through our creativity. So they're going to be able to really see and understand it's all going to become tangible to them. That's what clients, I think, are looking for, is they want some tangibility to a lot of the, shall we say, theory and science that Anthesis are bringing. So the initial reactions from these clients has been very positive.
Yeah, I would say the same. So we have been working with a fairly long list of clients over the last couple of years, actually, to look at options for packaging change that will go towards the delivery of specific goals around recyclability or carbon reduction or inclusion of recycled content and so on. And as part of that exercise, when we help a client write a strategy, we look at what those different options might be, and we hypothetically then model different scenarios to see how close we get to closing the gap between today's packaging portfolio and the packaging portfolio of the future that will meet their goals. What I think our clients are now super excited about is this opportunity to say, right, now we know what good looks like. We can see what we need to do from this modeling exercise. Let's go work with the Anthesis trusted partnership and start to create some of those solutions and test those within our own business or within our commercial retail customer base, or even with the consumer focus groups. And so for them to be able to say, well, it's gone from an idea in a strategy that was modeled and looked like it was going to close the gap to something that I can physically share with stakeholders who are going to be part of the future of that packaging innovation, I think has been met with just enormous enthusiasm by our customers.
Um, and then building on that, Debbie, I think the other thing is it's the ability to see how brands could own the innovation as well, because of course everybody's trying to find these wonderful solutions, but brands also want to be able to differentiate themselves in the marketplace as well. So I think that's another area that we can bring in that differentiation and ownability.
Yes, that's really important in terms of just kind of establishing brands' leadership ambitions and delivery in competitive markets. I think most of our clients are operating in, and particularly brands that have got to differentiate versus perhaps retailer brand offers as well. So it's an important point, Mike. Look, I think we're about out of time, unfortunately. I think the clue is in the name Infinite. We could go on and on here, and I'm sure we will. I think we should have another follow-up conversation to check in and see how this new platform is developing, and hear again from you, Debbie, and from you, Mike. Thank you both for being part of this discussion. And if anyone out there listening has got any questions or additional comments, please reach out, get in touch. I'm sure Debbie and Mike would just love to hear from you. So thank you all very much.